John Bruno, my visual effects supervisor, one of the things I love about him is that John Bruno hates visual effects. You know, his first thing will always be, well, do you have to do it as an effect? You know, if he could go out, capture a predator, and breed a couple of aliens, that would be the movie we'd make. You know, we'd all be wearing armored suits and we'd be shooting a documentary. And failing that, he'd like to go with hydraulic puppets and aliens and predators suits. And failing that, if you put a gun to his head, he'd like to go with an alien suit with a CG tail as a piece of enhancement. So you're looking at 90% reality, 10% CG. And failing that as a last possible resort, he would go the full CG route. And that's what I love about John, is that, you know, he's not in business to kind of be in business. John's approach is always real is better.
As far as using, you know, why do you still use suits over CGI? CGI is still not inexpensive. Computers are just basically still a tool in the filmmaker's toolkit. It's always still best to get something in camera. In this film, it was a lot of time spent on how we get the Queen, for example, in any sequence in the film, as the most efficient way in the schedule we have, and that is basically practical photography. You get the predators, you get the aliens as an in-camera shot. When we really go to the CG world as far as the aliens goes, because what they're doing in this fight, I mean, this is basically a brawl. It's a predator and the alien are in a fist fight, a big knockdown, drag-out fight. You physically can't get a guy in a suit to do what is required in the design and in the script of this movie. I mean, number one, you'd really injure the actor that's playing the alien. You know, we have huge leaps that they have to perform 60 feet. You just physically can't do it. So in that case, you go to CG. But when you go there, you still wanted to make it can't be completely different in feel and texture and tone as the live action that you've shot. So you still need photography, you still need guys in suits.
The reason we use computer graphics, there's a couple of big advantages. The first is the flexibility of the performance, the fact that you can dial in the performance over days instead of minutes on the set. You also have, obviously, the fact that you're not battling real materials and real gravity and real space. And so for the really complicated actions, or actions that might be deemed impossible to do with real objects in physical space, then of course the limitless 3D space that's all artificial inside a computer allows you to do whatever you like.
In the first movies, there's one thing that people love, and that's the face huggers. When the eggs open up, and the first stage of an alien's life is from the egg is this thing that leaps out and attaches itself to you. And the one thing that Paul was just desperate to do, and we all kind of thought would be really great, is to see what happens in the moment that it leaps and grabs you and attaches to your face. The first movie is 11 frames long. It's just a big scare. What we did in this film was show it in slow motion, that we had 4 or 5 facehuggers leaping, and we see them in slow motion, what they're doing. They look kind of like flying squirrels, like 500 frames a second, something like that. And but that can only be done, again, on a computer, because there's no other way to do that.
In terms of this sequence, Paul had a very strong idea about what he wanted, and John then set about storyboarding that in the pre-production phase and getting a look, an idea of where the cameras should go. And then we took it a little bit further and did a three-dimensional previs, or an animatic, of the sequence, so that by the time we were shooting, we were fairly clear about how this bit of the story could be told, what emphasis we were giving the action.
A previs is a very low-res animation with low-res geometry, where you can actually see what's happening in the shot. So you got a predator here, you got the facehugger that's splitting up. It's basically to set up the shot and say, okay, we want this camera angle, we want this speed, this animation. So once everyone is happy with the previous stage and the actual live action has been shot, then we start with the production of our CG hugger. First of all, we have to build a CG model, which we can see here. This is a model that is done by scanning an actual animatronic hugger, which has been used on the set, and then refining it and remodeling it by hand and making it usable for CG work.
One of the problems that we had with slow motion in these scenes is that it's not just slow motion, it's kind of photosonic slow motion. We're talking about 1200 frames per second. So if you look at high-speed crash footage, there's an awful lot of motion that you would never register in normal speed photography. So we're trying to recreate that kind of look, that kind of sense. We kind of took over from where ADI and the practical hugger left off. I think what we could bring to the film in terms of a CG hugger was a more choreographed, detailed action that is difficult to achieve with an animatronic. But we took our lead from the practical hugger because they built it, they established the look for it, and we then had to match it. So, for example, we took a cast of the practical and then built that, scanned that, and digitized it, and then built it in 3D space.
So what we see here is the final model that we're using. Actually, is a model of the hugger that's splitting in half. So you can see that we have two halves, and we're building interior stuff like brains, like bones, and all stuff that have to spill out once the hugger is splitting apart.
But then also, in terms of texturing, we took a lot of photographs of the practical hugger and applied those to our model.
So what we see here actually is the color surface of the hugger. This is for the external hugger. In this case, we're aiming for a quite disgusting look.
Also, on the shoot day, we would take one of their practical huggers so that when they did the shot, if there was going to be a CG hugger in, we'd walk the practical through the scene so we could get a feel for what the colour and the lighting was doing and how it was affecting the model so that we could recreate it.
Some guys just moving it through the frame, and this is as a reference for us for lighting, for the overall look, for, in this case, how wet the hugger should be and stuff like that. So this is our reference that we are aiming for.
One of the things that they also had on the practical was it was covered in slime. I think it was called ultra slime. So we had to recreate that look in 3D. And we spent quite a lot of time building a shader that would give that wet, slimy look, making it as disgusting as we could.
I spend most of the day on set sitting behind or next to the director or the DOP. A lot of the time you have two VFX set up in a day, so you're there all day, and suddenly things change around and that becomes 3 VFX. So you're always there on standby with your little markers and meter measurement tools and your cameras and stuff. And often the first point of contact is with the first AD and say, so, what's the plan? Any idea what the camera is going to be doing? And I'll say, well, the camera is just going to be stationary, or the camera is going to be on a dolly, or be booming up. So to work out what we need to derive the camera later. So then I'll get little LEDs up, you know what I mean? And I sort of get sort of 2 there, 2 there, 2 there, make sure they're a meter apart and that sort of stuff. And once we set up that half of it, you then sit down with the director, and he's like, "Is that okay with you? Do you know? Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah. Can I have less dust? Because we try and strip out all the dust because it's really hard to put a CG element behind dust. So we'd rather have a clean plate." So there's a little bit of like creative repartee between the director and myself. And most of the time, I'm there just to technically make sure that we can achieve the CG later. Here we have a number of shots. This is from the key sequence in the film, where this is the first time that we see Alien and Predator together on screen, and there's a big, big fight. And this is what the movie's all about.
3, 2, 1, and go!
And so, initially when we shot the stuff, we did have Tom up there hiding in the corner for reference, and we did some stunt tests with Tom as well, and it soon became clear that the beginning of Tom's movie was good, and the end was really, really good, but to get him to do exactly what Paul wanted in the air, the right pose, the right speed, and to totally control it, it was going to become a CG alien. So if I just go to the before and after. So this is what the original plate with the live-action Predator, tracking markers, and you notice minimum dust, and this is what we start with, and this is what we end with. So we have obviously a computer-generated alien jumping through the scene. And obviously you might not notice it, but there's a little actual, we've played with the camera move as well, so there's a little bit of re-rack on there. You notice the offset between the original and the second one, so you've got a little rack up and down as the alien jumps through the air. Do you know what I mean? Again, it's something that's really handy, and when you're doing this sort of move in post-production, you can afford to reframe a little bit so we can catch the alien coming up and catch it coming down. Sort of thing. And the whole task of these shows is just integration to make him sit in there. And so I'm on set taking photo lighting reference, and it records all the positions of the lights and the intensity of the lights, and it produces an HDRI map, which is a higher dynamic range image, which means that you have a floating point image, and if your light's really, really hot, all that data is still recorded within that image. So you end up with lots of these photo references, then we use those to actually generate the true reflections. Like all these lamps here are the true reflections of the true intensities as they were shot on set that day. A lot of shots we've done with the alien, it's about collaboration between what is Tom in a suit and digital tails. A lot of the time it was very hard to get the practical tail to really have the sense that it was a lethal weapon, you know? And to be able to control it without having 4 or 5 puppeteers just off camera. And it gets to the point where I think with when you puppeteer things, you spend a lot of money removing the wires, and you get to the point where it should be, what does this make it a visual effect tail? And you have the option to, in a way, choreograph the fight later on. So when Paul's cutting the sequence together, he can have, right, so at this point I want the tail to be up, ready and striking. I want the tail to be coming down, ready to trip him. All those things we've animated and put in later. So on these shots, we put tracking markers into the dark patches because that's where we know possibly when we get the plates back and the exposure may be very low. And you notice one shot, we had a little track rig, sort of 3 prongs that was stuck on the base of his tail. When he does it, it'll wiggle so we can track our tail on there perfectly. And then you can see how much dust we put back into the plate afterwards.
Another of the sequences that we were involved with was the approach to the Piper Maru at the beginning of the film, which involved a miniature shoot of a helicopter and a boat. This is the background element as was shot. Got here a miniature boat and then a kind of miniature set. And the blue here is a blue screen which we were going to replace with ice channel later. Once we've done that, we take that camera move of the set and previs in the helicopter in a CG environment, then export that camera move to the motion control rig, which is what here. This is a miniature helicopter against blue screen. We've exported our motion from CG, and this is how the two fit together. So very rough early composite showing the miniature helicopter that was shot separately over the background plate of the boat. And here, finally, a composite with the CG ice channel in digital matte painting and CG helicopter blades. One of the things that Paul was very keen to get into this shot was a sense of menace and foreboding. You know, they're travelling towards danger.
In Predator, one of the very interesting and kind of fun things the predators do is they cloak so they can hide when they're hunting. When they cloak, they're reflecting the surrounding area. I mean, if they're in the jungle, it reflects the jungle off them. They're basically a transparent image. In the first 2 films, it was the era of opticals. All you could do was, through the optical process of matting, make a transparent image, basically a photographic way. Today, with computer graphics, we can make a 3D image. We can have a reflection map and a texture map. We can make a chrome image that reflects everything around it and then make it transparently fit into a scene and make it look like it's invisible. And all you're doing is enhancing the background almost like a lens. That's the approach we took on this film. We tried to make it remain similar to the original films, but take it a little step further. We have a lot of shots with a Predator vision, which we've sort of based on the original and updated it, what we think is updated. that looks cool. He has many more levels of vision. He can basically look through your clothes, look through your skin, look through your flesh, through your body.
The flashback scenes are really fun because a lot of times in visual effects, we're just looking at making something integrated into shots. You know, we're worrying about adding a little piece to the shot. But with the flashback scenes, every pixel you see in the finished work is completely generated in this facility. We're seeing a lot of crowd systems these days in various films and stuff. But this shot was particularly difficult in that they're so packed in. And their form is really crazy with the tails and the way these guys crawl around on all four limbs and things like that. And so we had to really kind of bend our crowd system, which we've used in other films, to make it do this crazy massive aliens screaming up this pyramid.
We have the aliens in here, we have the CG pyramid, and a matte painting sky. 16,000 aliens. We've got a specialist rendering tool here, which we've used for previous shows. We've been developing for a couple of years now. It means you don't have to animate every single individual alien. You know? What you do is you get an idea of what do these guys have to do and what they're going to have to look like. They're not entirely intelligent, but they avoid each other and they select animation things that you make. So you make a series of animations in which you have a stepping alien, a jumping alien, a crawling alien, and then the system works out what the alien should be doing relative to the other aliens. Is it on stairs? Is it on a wall? And then makes it jump, makes it climb, and makes it step, and vice versa.
The crowd system has layers to it. You have the basic animation that is fed into the system, and that determines what the characters can do at all. And then you have a choreography stage where the artist describes where they can walk, where they can't walk, how dense the crowd should be, the random factors such as how much they avoid one another, different changes in size, all in a random way that gives the crowd a more natural feeling. Crowd systems are interesting because they are simulations. Each member of the crowd, you are giving him possibilities and you're giving him movements. But once you push go, it's like a real crowd. You can't really control it. And so you get a lot of interesting results. Sometimes you get little guys that are spinning off into their own little space and doing something that doesn't relate to what you want at all, and you have to take them out. Aliens in particular are pretty squirrely because the way they move is not like anything we've seen before in a crowd. So we weren't exactly sure how to make it look right, you know? I mean, the main thing to me was that it felt like a big crawling hill of insects.
And then we have specialist aliens who are there just to get shot by the plasma fire as they come down. You see a couple of these guys here, you notice them, boom! They fly backwards, you know, and they get hit by the desperate plasma fire from our struggling predators.
I think the main thing when you're putting scenes together like this is to focus on drama, you know, and sometimes drama can help you. For example, in this scene, it's very darkly lit, and that's quite helpful because the impression you get by looking through a darkly lit scene and just seeing the glistening heads and bodies of thousands of aliens and the highlights coming off, only occasionally revealed through flashes of lightning. That, I think, is scarier and more creepy than if you saw them all in full daylight, for example.
The biggest challenge after reading the script and talking all this through with Paul was the alien queen. The queen has to be realized visually in 3 different ways. We have a full-size practical queen that's 16 feet tall. It's got 47 points of articulation. We have a puppet version of that that's a 3rd scale, which is close to 4 feet. And then we have, of course, a computer-generated image of that queen, and all of those have to tie together to make a seamless event when you're watching it on the screen.
When I first saw the storyboards for the Queen's Chamber, I thought, oh my God, this is one of these ones that I just don't see how we'll do it exactly. It just looked like a really, really difficult job to marry the 3D computer stuff right into the miniature set in this case.
It's one example of difference between why use CG and why use a puppet. In this case, the Queen doesn't have to do anything particularly extraordinary, you know? And you can roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and just try different things, different positions and stuff. But to try and puppeteer 5 aliens at the same time, jumping onto the Queen, you know, that amount of detail and movement and complexity would, I imagine, be impossible. So here we have the original plate as it was shot on set. What we had is a quarter-size puppeteered Queen on this set. So this set here is about a metre and a half tall, this big egg sac, and they shot the whole thing at 76 frames a second to make her feel big and powerful. So on set it was quite amusing because she was moving really fast and crazy, and when you see it play back, she's really big and slow and elegant and graceful. We've deliberately left out all the atmospherics. We took the steam down, and we've taken all the fog down.
And it's just a few shots, but it is really tricky because it's the kind of thing where you just want to see them in there and believe it, and it's not a big, flashy, in-your-face moment. It's a slow, progressing moment, and they're crawling over her body.
This is now close to final. This is where we've taken it. So we've added foreground steam in the background, and these sort of rays of fog up here. So the aliens are now moving between that, and the aliens are casting their own shadows through that fog.
You just don't want to blow the effect by seeing any misregistered shadows or any sort of edges or funny things in the final work. The Queen is really hard to animate. She is, on the one hand, shaped like a human to some degree, but then she's also proportioned like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And when we see her in the second Alien movie, Aliens, they've done some very selective framing of various rigs and puppets to get an effect. But in this film, there's quite a lot of wide framings where you see her whole body, and you see her doing quite a lot of big dynamic action movements, which we've never had to see the Queen do before. So coming up with really cool moments that feel like a big, powerful Queen that doesn't look like a person too much, it's trickier than we thought. You look at her and you think, wow, she's such a great design. It should just be a piece of cake. But it turned out we really had to be careful with her arms. Every time you use her big arms, she starts to look like a person running or walking or whatever. We had to be very careful with various poses to make emphasis of the tail and the spikes on the back and the crown of her head to give her a special look. And also, she's a hard-driving, predatorial killer sort of animal, but then she's alien. You know, she's not a T-Rex, she's an alien character, which means her motivations in a way are sort of unknowable. You know, is she just out to kill? Is she out for revenge? Is she angry? Is she hunting? You know, what's the mood of her in these various moments? And how does she move in a way that's, you know, alien-like and part insect, part machine, part animal, all at the same time? So what we start with in the computer is we go shot by shot, we take the storyboards, and we create a 3D model that represents all of the objects. In this case, this scene takes place in what's called the separator set. It includes this large tank and a bunch of old, dilapidated wood structures and things like this. It's a snowy environment. There's a heavy fog in the air. And all these things we want to see and feel and kind of get an initial idea of how the shots are going to cut together, what the movement might be like, all that kind of stuff. And here, we're setting up even little bits of drama, like when the Queen reaches in, the fact that the separator tank is falling down on top of Lex, and pieces of the separator are coming apart, falling all around her head, and she's having to dodge them and whatnot. the progression and escalation of the Queen's rage as she's pounding against the tank, splintering pieces of wood underneath, all that kind of stuff. And so when we're on the set and we're shooting these very shots, and there's no Queen in them, sometimes there's the full-size animatronic Queen, but in our case, most of our shots, there will be no Queen in the shot. This sort of shooting guide gives the cinematographer, the actors, the grips, the lighting people, the set people that are building the set, the props people bringing the props on, everybody gets a sense of what the pacing of the action is, what the beats are of the scene, what happens and when, and how it unfolds. The progression of the damage to the tank and the set itself was a really big deal on the set, because you have to build pieces of the set at different levels of damage to progress through the shoot. So all these things are demonstrated in a very simple form with these animatics. Once we've taken all the pre-visualization work, we go out onto the set and we sort of one by one tick off the list and get all the shots, which we call background plates. We bring the background plates back to our studio. We have them scanned into the computer, and we get what you see here, which is empty backgrounds without any sort of Queen in them, obviously. And we get an edit of the sequence that looks roughly like this. We have our star reacting to a Queen that isn't there. We have pieces of the set moved by the special effects guys on the set. We have a few shots of the full-size animatronic Queen getting in there and doing her bits. And then we have all these empty moments where the computer graphics will step in. And in this case, we're seeing the Queen attacking this tank. She'll be standing right there where this green screen is, this backing. We have our actress pulling a chain, which is supposed to be connected to our full CG Queen. Scar, the predator, comes in, starts to tug away as well. And the main thing missing here is we have no Queen in this scene, as well as several of the backgrounds which need to be replaced entirely because we're supposed to be seeing further into the set than was physically built. Now this is a scene in progress. What we have here is starting to lay in the computer graphics Queen, just putting her into different shots, starting to balance the lighting on the Queen to match the lighting of the environment. In some cases, we're putting in photographic elements such as puffs of dust or pieces of snow or even blood splats that happen when one of the heroes is injured or something. All these bits and pieces are getting laid in one after the other. We have to look at them in context like this of a cut so that we know that they work from shot to shot, that there's continuous action, that the drama unfolds the proper way, that as the separator set is damaged or the Queen is damaged or anything that's changing from shot to shot, it all cuts together nicely. And it takes several stages and several groups of people to take each of these shots to a finished state. The first round is the match movers and animators. So for every camera position you see in this shot, we have to create a duplicate camera position in 3D space. Then we have an animator puts the computer graphics Queen in place and moves it and gives it the life. And then a lighting crew comes in and places lights all around inside the computer's 3D space and lights that Queen just like as if she had been sitting on the stage with everybody else. And then finally a compositing and effects team comes in, and the effects group will put drool coming off of the Queen's mouth, for example, because these aliens are always drooling all the time. When she gets the spear in her head, there'll be a blood spurt that comes out. That's a 3D effect. And the compositing people take all of these different pieces and put them together and make sure that all of the 3D pieces, all of our computer graphics 3D pieces, and all of the background images marry together seamlessly, look like they were all photographed together originally on the same day, and then hopefully we have a final scene.